It's interesting that they're having this Trump thing right now with Sally Yates talking about potential leaks of classified information and people who might have given the Russians access to information. Looking at these three brothers who had access to top secret information in our Congress and still work for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So the problem with that is they make 3 times as much money as everybody else in their pay grade. They have 12 houses. Their friends have 12 houses. They have different social security numbers. People that have died in California 20 years ago, they threatened to kidnap their stepmother's relatives in Pakistan. They threatened the IT director in Congress for more password capability for the access to congressional information. Just wondered why none of that came up today in the hearings.
Well, let's just focus on Russia, and then we don't have to actually talk about what's really going on. I've talked to so many different people that are really convinced of the Russia thing. I guess if you just keep saying it enough times. Here in Canada, it was in Maclean's magazine. They thought, oh, well, that must be real then. If you feed it to people enough, then they're going to actually believe it.
Just a matter of how much you want to invest in trying to prove Hillary didn't lose the election. I mean, it just seems like that hasn't stopped since the election was over. I mean, I'm a Bernie crap. So, I mean, I don't, I want Tulsi Gabbard, so I'm not like a Trump, real crazy Trump guy, but I can see she's poison to the Democratic Party. It's just too long. The Bush Clinton thing is just, everybody's just tired of it. Well, I do an open media research, so I'm a journalist and I kind of follow the story where it goes. And the story is basically Watergate meets Iran-Contra. It's actually 20 Watergates because there's 20 burglaries involved in this story. It is on Capitol Hill. Instead of being a psychiatrist's office, it's burglaries of members of Congress who work from the most sensitive areas of our intelligence community. So it's very applicable with Sally Yates on the Hill today talking about Russia. And the Iran-Contra piece is this is because the intelligence gathered is enabling things that we call rat lines. So rat lines are illegal trade, and Iran-Contra, for people who don't remember, was when we were sending guns from Mena Airport in Arkansas, and Hillary Clinton's law firm was running that. Rose law firm was sending them down to Nicaragua, to El Salvador to fund the Contras to try to take over Nicaragua. And then cocaine was coming back in the other direction to Mena Airport in Arkansas to pay for it. So that this is the same network of people in Iran-Contra, and it's the same, and it's new people doing the burglary. So that's kind of a summary. And what I do is I take leads from my listeners. And so, for instance, if these Pakistani brothers that are working in Congress, these 3 Pakistani brothers that are working in Congress, have 12 homes, I'll go and knock on the door of all 12 homes, which I've done, and I put that on the internet. So that's kind of how it moves along. So I'll go to Washington, D.C., I'll go to New York, I'll go to Maryland, wherever there's these safe houses, I'll go knock on the door. If there's been a triple murder somewhere from a team that they have in their ISI Pakistani intelligence network, I'll go knock on that door and try to talk to the people who live at the house of the triple murder. So that's kind of a summary of what I do.
It's unbelievable what George does. For anybody who has not seen the videos, you really need to go over to YouTube. And it is George Webb, isn't it? It's YouTube/George Webb. What is your YouTube channel?
Yeah, it should be, if you type George Webb and YouTube, you should get me right away. If you really want to be sure, just say the word Awan, which is AWAN. That's the last name of those 3 brothers, that 3 Pakistani intelligence operatives that are in Congress, and it'll get you right there.
The reason that I want people to go over there, of course, is so that they can get all of the story. It started back in October, I believe. It was following Eric Braverman, who was one of the Clinton staff. Was working for the Clinton Foundation, I understand. If correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was around October 19th. I'm trying to remember the exact day, but he stopped using his Twitter account, and you wanted to find out where he was, and that's kind of how this particular saga started.
Yeah, three different people, three key founders of WikiLeaks died in succession over 5 months. And on October 26th, coincidentally, the same day that Hillary attributes James Comey of throwing the election against her, that same day, the last founder of WikiLeaks dies, and on a Sunday afternoon. And then the Monday morning, Eric Braverman, the CEO of the Clinton Foundation, makes a run for the Russian consulate to try to get, sort of like a Snowden run, to try to get out of the country, because he realizes the FBI is working with Hillary as well. And that's when True Pundit also came out with an article a week later on November 2nd saying there's 650,000 emails on Anthony Weiner's server, and they got there from Huma, and they're classified. There's classified information. Somehow made it from Hillary to Huma to Anthony Weiner. So, of course, this is very timely because James Comey just confirmed that in front of the Senate in his recent testimony that that's exactly what happened. It took 7 months, but he finally confirmed that happened.
Well, it's interesting because these hearings are going on right now, and it coincides nicely with some of the things that you've brought out, because you've laid all the groundwork, and then pretty much every day there's something that comes out that confirms the information that you have put forward in your videos. And it's amazing when you talk about it being, Watergate, Iran-Contra. I think, as I was saying to you earlier, when we look back on this, when we look back through history at this time and what you're doing, it's going to be way bigger than either of those things as far as I'm concerned. And everything is just being confirmed as you go along. For those of us that started at the beginning and kind of went, where's this going? I think it's taken a turn for you. Tell us about how that's happened as far as how things have taken a little bit of a zigzag along the road.
Yeah, if you remember the original Watergate, you're too young, but it actually came out before the election in 1972. The story did. The Woodward Bernstein story came out in the Washington Post, and it wasn't until about this time, it took about 6 months to incubate before it actually broke as a big story, where people started asking questions. Everybody knew about it at least 3 or 4 weeks before the election, almost the same exact timing. The differences in this is that because I study complex intelligence networks in my reporting, I understood the link between the Pakistani intelligence people that were in the Congress and different networks and these different rat lines. So if you want to go back in history, you can just read, and there are these people that Hillary worked with. One of them was Amjad Awan, Amjad. He was the guy who originally set up the heroin rat line in 1979 to help support, again, a Contra type of activity with Osama bin Laden fighting against the Russians in Afghanistan. Well, Amjad Awan goes to Central America to set up the drug laundering of Hillary Clinton for the Mina airport, the thing I described earlier. So if you understand that history, it's easy to put together when you bring in three new Awan Pakistani operatives, these Awan brothers, to Congress, working for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Jackie Speer, Tom Becerra in California, 31 different Democrats. You can easily draw links to a lot of things if you understand those old links, the modus operandi, and you just say, "Oh, this is the old Iran-Contra all over again." Yeah, if you see it as if you've seen the first 6 Rockies, then when you see the 7th Rocky, you go, "I think I know what's going to happen. He's going to win at the end." Sometimes he does. There's another sequel, and so I predicted, and I've been in places. Because of sources I have with retired FBI and retired NYPD and so forth. And I've been in places to connect the dots before mainstream media got there, but then mainstream media caught up. I was in Central Islip, for instance, for the murder of the 4 MS-13 kids about 2 weeks before Jeff Sessions I was talking about
Hmm.
Gulen, Feta Gulen, 100 days ago, and how he's using drugs, much like he used in Afghanistan and Central Asia, to undermine U.S. veterans, to target U.S. veterans here in the United States through the VA. Jeff Sessions just met today with the Justice Minister of Turkey to talk about extradition of Gulen. So it's almost like Jeff Sessions is watching me. It's kind of uncanny, actually. I mean, it could be. Uh, it has happened so many times in this series, and I'm not trying to be braggadocio or anything. I'm just saying with the facts. You can go on the video and see me at Central Islip at the funeral thing for the kids, and I said these kids were recruited by
Hmm.
Pakistani ISI. They've been running this thing for about 35 years. The limo drivers pick up the girls in New York, and they run them out to these parties in Long Island. There's also the Long
Hmm.
Island killer, a serial killer case that I've also connected the dots on, and I'm just waiting basically for those shoes to drop. But that's 14 or 15 murders, which you're going to find MS-13 and Pakistani MSI. Pakistani MSI are kind of like the managers of the McDonald's, and the MS-13 is a gang out of El Salvador that came from Iran-Contra again. Came from Iran-Contra.
Hmm.
So it was Pakistani ISI doing the recruiting and setting up the rat lines way back then, and using MS-13. The MO has not changed in 37 years.
It's amazing to me, and here's one person. I mean, mind you, you've got a lot of people, as you say, that you're conversing with, and you're actually exchanging information with. But amazing that the FBI and all of the various letter networks are not able to find these folks, are not able to come up with the same theories or ideas that you yourself have been able to come up with by connecting the dots from previous modus operandi. And there's so much about this that is similar to what happened. And I was around during Watergate. I was young, but I was there. And it's amazing to me that the same things can happen over and over again, and that we can't figure them out, and we can't, that it doesn't pique our interest. And I think that's really why I want to introduce my listeners to you. And I have a very smart group of people out there that really need to know about this and really need to understand what's going on, and to spread the word that someone like George Webb is out there. I'm just wowed by you, walking up to people's doors and putting together, not just talking about it, but actually going out and doing the groundwork and traveling. You've covered a lot of ground in the last little while. You've been to New York, you've been to Iowa.
I started
Yes,
with
go
a
ahead, you
swing
tell me.
going through
Mm-hmm.
Detroit, looking at pain clinics, because there's a rat line with pain clinics where there's several ways you can bring in animal drugs and then cut animal drugs. Horse pills and even elephant pills can be reduced down for human consumption and substituted for real pain medication. So there's that rat line. Illegal drugs, obviously, as well, can be brought in to the Detroit area. But mainly, I looked at 3 different doctors that had been convicted of deliberately killing or grossly gross incompetence in overdosing people with opioids. So
Mm-hmm.
then I moved to Toronto and Montreal, and I looked at kind of the heroin rat line there, as well as the illegal immigration rat line through Toronto and um, Montreal. I came down to New York. I looked at a lot of the Long Island serial killer was certainly one of them, but we looked at a lot of financial type fraud, and then went to Maryland. I visited the VA. Looked at doctors prescribing, shuttling, making sure that there was a choke point for referrals, referring only to a network of Pakistani doctors who felt very sympathetic toward the jihad type motive. Then moved on to Washington, D.C. Like I said, I knocked on all those doors in Virginia. I knocked on doors in Maryland, and really kind of just followed the rat lines. It's really all you have to do. Today, I went to another rat line location today in Pittsburgh. And it's amazing because, they do this in law enforcement. If there's a burglary, they don't look at for burglars that live in a different state. They look at, burglars live within a, 12 block radius, and they start with a 3 block radius. And that's all I do. I just use those same basic law enforcement techniques to try to get to the truth.
It's taken you all over the place. Now, I know you didn't go to Haiti, but I think a lot of people might be really interested, or at this point they might be a little bit confused, because we're talking about rat lines, we're talking about drugs, we're talking about illicit drugs. There's also the VA that's involved in all of this. There's hospice, there's all these different things. But basically it goes back to this idea that humans are actually more valuable dead than alive, I suppose, if you wanted to put it that way. That their organs, their bodies are worth quite a bit, and so that goes back to the Haiti connection. Can you tell us a little bit about that and sort of bring us up to speed as far as how that becomes a North American connection?
Sure. There's this company called DynCorp, and they basically DynCorp, and they basically come into existence at the same time the CIA does. And anytime you have a CIA, you're going to have helicopters, and you're going to have to fly people around and airplanes. So you need somebody to maintain them. So DynCorp started that way. The problem with DynCorp is they said, well, we're going to fly a part down to Colombia. We may as well fill up the rest of the hold here in the C-130 with guns and make some money that way. And then it's flying back, and then somebody says, well, gee, it's empty now. All the guns are out of it. Why don't we stuff it full of drugs? And so this has been the DynCorp MO. So that's really what started DynCorp, was all the drug activity. And you can just Google DynCorp and drug running. And DynCorp is in Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, and they're the ones that are training the police departments. So I don't think they're going to turn themselves in. So they did that in Central America quite a bit. But then going over toward Europe, as time moved on, they started getting into when you have Middle Eastern countries that you're doing the police work for, like Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan, Pakistan. Now, because you can marry somebody who's 6 years old or 7 or 8 or 9, now the child trafficking becomes viable, and DynCorp has done child trafficking. In Syria, there's a huge, the White Helmets is the shell organization, the front organization that, and I'm not saying all the White Helmets, I'm not saying all the White Helmets at all, but it's the group that comes in at night, the ISIS guys that come in at night. So that started that. Now in 1993 starts. And basically, it's the same. If you understand Pakistan, ISI, the intelligence service of ISI, with Osama bin Laden, they create this group called the Mujahideen. And if you want to understand the last 37 years of history, you just move the Mujahideen to different squares. You just move them to different countries. So what happened with Pakistan is after the Soviet Union fell in 1989, they moved them over to Bosnia. They moved them into Albania first for training, and then they moved them into Bosnia to break off chunks of Yugoslavia, because they were done with Russia, and then they moved them to Kosovo. So in '99 is when you start with organ harvesting, which you alluded to. And organ harvesting, they were using these Turkish doctors, and that gets you NATO. So you travel to Turkey to get your new kidney, and then it was hearts, and then it was livers, and then it was lungs. But your heart's $250,000. Your liver's $250,000. Kidney $200,000 each kidney. Your pancreas is worth a lot. Your bone marrow is the most valuable thing in your body, and you can recover that 17 days later. So there's a huge profit motive. If you have a Serbian prisoner and you don't like the way he looks at you that day, you can beat him senseless within an inch of his life and get him over to the operating table and make quite a bit of money.
It's just absolutely mind-boggling to think about what's happening. I mean, we're talking about the child trafficking, but it's the organ harvesting. Just it's mind-boggling, and I think this is why some people have such a hard time with it. I know I did when I first started to hear about it. We hear about some of the child porn things that are happening. There was a bust that happened in Toronto just this week in Canada, but this is far more sinister than child porn. We're talking about child trafficking, and then the harvesting of organs, particularly with kids and young, healthy folks. I think one of the things you were talking about in Pittsburgh was the fact that there's a hospital there that pioneered some of the organ transplant techniques.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So the CIA has long, the CIA is the Secret Service of Wall Street. It's not the Secret Service of the people of the United States. It works for Wall Street. So that's the first thing to understand. And Wall Street's very interested in new technology, new medical technology, virus and vaccine technology, as well as transplant technology, as well as bioweapons type technology. So they were the ones that originally funded all this transplant at the University of Denver, which is really University of Colorado at Boulder, but it's downtown in Denver. They did a lot of research on animals and then early human experiments that have not come to light yet, but there's a guy named Starzl, S-T-A-R-Z, no E-L, Starzl, and he is the person who does the first liver transplant at University of Denver. Now you got to commercialize it and make some money. So one of the first things he did was come here to Pittsburgh at UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and then started doing these transplants on Arab oil sheikhs, where they would rent out the whole floor. And jump to the head of the line, which is something you're not supposed to be able to do when you're waiting for organs. And my evidence on this comes from the operating room nurse who worked with Starzl, for 40 years. So and UCLA is going to be the same thing. A lot of the people who contribute to my series are firsthand witnesses. So I'm not reporting WikiLeaks or Wikipedia. Sometimes I'll do WikiLeaks and that, but most of the time it's people who've experienced this stuff firsthand.
You're going on the road and actually meeting people as you go. I think you diverted your plan. You were going to be doing the mango run, and then you ended up meeting with the nurse, as far as I remember. The mango run is a whole different thing, but people just need to go and take a look at the other videos so that they understand what that means. But, here's George getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning so that he can actually take a look at how plausible it is that people can be selling mangoes for, $6 each or something. There might be something more to the mangoes. You'll get a lead, or you'll get somebody talking about something in the comments, and then off you go in a different direction, which is, I think, the best form of journalism. For anybody who doesn't know about George, they need to go over to his YouTube channel. As he says, you can just put Awan, A-W-A-N, and you'll find anything to do with George, but it's George Webb with 2 B's, and you can go and start right from the beginning and go through. I really highly recommend that you do that if you find any of this confusing. We're trying to just synthesize it down into the shortest introduction possible, but I think what we're trying to do is give as big an umbrella for people to work with. We were talking about the fact that there's a lot of investigations going on Capitol Hill, and one of the things is Hillary Clinton's servers. If anybody's heard about the server issue, she's talking about how her servers really were just used to talk about Chelsea's wedding and yoga and that sort of thing, and yet she hasn't handed them over. I think any of Bernie supporters out there would be interested in the fact that she has done quite a bit to alter the outcome, shall we say, of both the Democratic convention and then later the election, even though she is blaming the Russians. So, George, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about the Clinton Foundation and how it ties in with all of this.
Sure. Well, the Clinton Foundation started in Arkansas as a library for the governor, as kind of for posterity. So it's far exceeded its charter. to begin with. But the original guys who originally started were kind of good old boys, Doug Band and Justin Cooper and Lanny, and I can't remember his last name. But they basically just, when they went to Washington, they just made the Clinton Foundation bigger. The Clinton Foundation, for those who don't know, what they did in Arkansas, they had a development corporation called ADFA, Arkansas Development Finance Association. And so when they would get this money, if you have it in your account or I have it in my account, and it starts at the beginning of the month and it goes up to $100 million at the end of the month, the local branch manager, the local branch manager and the FBI say, "Hey, what's going on here? You work at the the local Dunkin' Donuts." But if it's a large development finance corporation, it's a perfect front company to move money in and out. So what they do is they clear out the account at the end of the month. They zero out the account at the end of the month, and so it could build up to 100 million again the next month. So Little Mina Airport was a $100 million a month operation, and they cleared it through the Bank of Georgia with Burt Lance and Mark Rich, through banks in Florida, and then through Citibank into Europe. So that's how they cleared the money. And I can go into all that later on, but the key here to understand the right now is the Awan brothers two of them were brought in about 2004. And these are spies, these are hackers, and they've been in Congress. They've worked for up to 80 different Congress people, okay, over those 12 or 14 years now, okay? So they've had access over a long period of time. And a lot of the scandals you hear about were, at first she attacked enemies of the impeachment, but as time has gone on, it's been more and more people along the way. Okay, so that's what I follow. Now these Awan brothers are they have multiple Social Security numbers. They have multiple houses. I mentioned these 12 houses. That's unusual. They have also a car dealership called Cars International A, like CIA. It goes bankrupt to the tune of $1 million. They have several mortgage companies while they're working for all these different people from Congress as well. They're being paid 3 times as much as everybody else in Congress. And they've got different companies that want to bring rice in from Pakistan. And they've got transportation companies, refrigerated fruit, produce transportation, shipping companies. They've got all this stuff. If you're just really an exchange student, you usually don't have all that stuff. Well, as I mentioned, I went to knock on all 12 doors, and one of the doors I knocked on was the outcomes to this very upscale 5-bedroom house, 750 or about $1 million house in Lorton, Virginia. It's 9667 Hawks Head Drive if people want to look it up. And out comes this Marine, and I mean he looks like he just came right off the Iwo Jima statue in Washington D.C. So he's just, "What are you doing at my house?" I'm saying, "Well, hey, I'm researching this project. Do you know Imran Awan?" He said, "Yeah, I know Imran Awan, but he said his name was Alex." I said, "Well, he was a little mad that I was at his doorstep late at night, but I said, there's a rumor that there's missing BlackBerries and missing laptops. And Hillary had 17 missing BlackBerries and 4 or 5 missing laptops." He goes, "Well, that's funny because there was a pile of BlackBerries left here by Imran Awan, and there was 4 laptops left by Imran Awan." I go, "Well, did they have government markings on them?" He goes, "Yes, they did." I said, "Well, what did you do?" He goes, "Well, that didn't seem right that somebody from member of Congress would." Now, they worked in IT, so they could have just been taking machines home to work on. But anyway, he called the FBI, and the FBI came and got it. Now, his name's Andre Taggart. I've already released his name. He's a Marine, a retired Marine now. I'm not going to release his wife's name because she's still in the Navy. But because they wanted to eliminate them as a suspect in stealing this government equipment, because it was later determined to be stolen equipment. There's a capital investigation for this. NCIS came out, the Navy intelligence, to make sure that she wasn't involved. And then Capitol Police, it was finally relegated to Capitol Police. Now, that all would have been understandable. The FBI saying, "Oh, this is just a case where somebody stole stuff from Congress and that's a Capitol Police matter." But you add in the fact earlier in the year, in January, the stepmother of the Awan brothers, the stepmother. Her name's Galani. So just think of Benazir Bhutto in your mind, you know, a Pakistani woman, older Pakistani woman. She says the Awan brothers imprisoned her in her home, forced her to turn over her inheritance to them, threatened to kill her relatives in Pakistan, and threatened to kidnap her relatives in Pakistan. There also is another report from the Daily Caller, Luke Rosiak in Washington, saying the same Imran Awan threatened a person in the House of Representatives in IT department to give them top secret access. And there's also a WikiLeaks email showing that Imran had Debbie Wasserman Schultz's iPad and had the password. So now these people have access to the top secret information in the United States. That is a matter for the FBI.
Not a lot of people use BlackBerries anymore. They actually could go buy a server and all of the information would just be picked up right off of the BlackBerries and it would coalesce onto this one server. Is that how the government BlackBerries work?
Yeah. So James Comey and articles came out a few days ago by Judicial Watch that were released from Hillary Clinton to Huma Abedin, about 800 of them. And one of the articles confirmed it was government-issued BlackBerries. So these are what they use for secure email. So they're encrypted email, government-secured BlackBerries. There's also another email from Hillary, from Huma to Hillary saying, have Anthony Weiner send a secure phone, meaning a BlackBerry, to New York with your Washington, D.C., quote-unquote, trusted staff. Now, the trusted staff is the Awan brothers. I've made that connection, but you can go out there and just Google trusted staff, and you'll see the email I'm talking about, where Anthony Weiner is the person running this intelligence operation with the Awan brothers. It hasn't really broken yet, but what the way this works is you have a BlackBerry and you sync it to your laptop. And when you walk near your laptop, if you have Bluetooth, it automatically syncs, or if you have the radio on, it syncs all the time. So what Hillary did was she would go, I've also produced emails showing that Hillary wanted to use the BlackBerry in the secure computer information facility, which is called a SCIF, which is against the NSA rules. The reason why she did it was she was doing these emails in these secret meetings and then walking out on the 7th floor balcony at the State Department, the famous 7th floor balcony, and it was linking and syncing. So if you wanted to spy and get all the emails of 12 different people or 19 different people at the State Department, you would give them each a BlackBerry. All you need is a laptop for it to sync to. And you're getting all their emails as they're sending the emails. Well, it just turns out that there's FBI paperwork. In the conspiracy, there's 19 different people with BlackBerries in the State Department. Those are the Hillary emails. Those are the 650,000 emails on Huma's server. And that's what I'm trying to get. This series started with me saying the 650,000 emails are going to be the 19 State Department people with BlackBerries. I said that on day 30. So James Comey confirmed that it was syncing. He didn't know how exactly the emails got from Huma's device to the laptop, and I can say exactly how it's called desktop sync.
They're still talking about how emails got forwarded to Anthony Weiner from Huma, and it was just so that he could print them out, and they're still talking about whether that was okay. But really, cut out the middleman, it was syncing, and it wasn't just because it was her husband. You're saying that there was a connection there with the Awan brothers, or there is a connection, and that Anthony Weiner is not the ding-dong that he's been made out to be. It's a cover.
Yeah, that's a cover story because here's how we know. And again, it's their own evidence. These are government documents that I produce, and I show them in the channel. First, there's undisputable. These emails, first of all, belong to the people of the United States of America. The Federal Records Act says all of these belong to the United States of America. So if you illegally use a private email, that also belongs to the government through the Federal Records Act. Okay. There is 19, I show this in my emails, there's 19 redacted names from the State Department. Okay. I know from the recent Judicial Watch emails that it says these were BlackBerry secure phones is where these things were. I have another email showing Anthony Weiner's trusted staff gave out these phones, and Huma would request a secure phone from Anthony Weiner. I've also got, now Anthony Weiner, don't forget, was in Congress from 1999 to 2011. So he would have had access to them in Washington, D.C. for about 7 or 8 years of that time. Okay, so he's no stranger to, even though he's run for mayor of New York, he's no stranger to Washington, D.C. He had 6 terms as a congressman. And I've also got the guy, Imran Awan, who had access to all his top secret information. At his house, I've got the BlackBerries and the laptops with government markings where the FBI didn't return them to Imran Awan. They confiscated them. So, we're getting really close here to the scheme. The scheme was a sinking scheme, and she was keeping track of the different people in the State Department. Now, the key question is, Joe Biden was a CrackBerry head. He used a BlackBerry everywhere. Victoria Nuland, who is kind of his sidekick, was a BlackBerry addict. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, was a BlackBerry addict. I have articles showing that President Obama's BlackBerry was modified by somebody, right? It was dumbed down so he could only call 10 phone numbers, and it was a secure phone. Now, for me, I think Hillary would want to know what the president's thinking at all times as well. I think she used this syncing methodology to tap the president's phone, and Biden's phone, and Victoria Nuland's phone.
It's plausible deniability in a certain way, too, so that people can say, well, no, I didn't forward these things, or I didn't know that this was happening. It was just sort of coincidence that I walked by this server and things just got taken off of my BlackBerry, or I received things from somebody else's BlackBerry. I think for any techies out there, they can see it very clearly. It might be a bit confusing for other people, but it just makes sense. And the fact that they're all BlackBerries.
I have other circumstantial evidence. For instance, the fact that there was a company called Lightstream Communications that Imran worked for at the same time as he was working in Congress for the 3 different congressmen simultaneously. And it was called Lightstream Communications. There's another company, LCC.com, in Pakistan that his father created. So they are a wireless company. They tap into wireless. The other person that he started another company called Nanoset Technologies. The other person was a cyber hacker. The other partner, a woman, a doctor at the VA in Maryland and Virginia, she's a part of a hacking organization that this one doctor has access to 30 different federal agencies' information. So this goes a lot farther than just Hillary's BlackBerries, 19 BlackBerries. This goes into the whole backbone, what I call the DynCorp backbone. DynCorp, by the way, is in charge of all the federal IT. So if you get in one, you get in the whole thing. So this is a huge story. And the whole thing breaks, the whole key to this, and I've said this from about day 7, is if you just publish the metadata from Huma's 650,000 emails that were on her server that were seized by the FBI from the New York Police Department, if you just grab that server, Anthony Weiner's server, and publish the metadata, there's no national secrets that are going to come out of this. Just who it's from, what the date was, and what the subject was of the email.
Right at the top of the email, there's a lot of gobbledygook, and it just, it lets the server know, and that's how things get routed, depending on if you're Canadian or American. The metadata that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, for instance, there are code names that are used at the State Department for different projects. Zero Footprint was the code name for Libya, for taking over Libya, toppling Libya. Timber Sycamore was the code name for toppling of Syria. There's going to be something like Timber Tupelo, because I think that's the code scheme they're using, where Timber is a coup, and then they're using the name Turkey and then taking a tree name that starts with the same name as the country. So Timber Sycamore was Syria. I think it's going to be Timber Tupelo for the coup, Gulen's coup in Turkey. But if in the metadata, I'm not talking even about the routing metadata. I'm saying RE, where your subject line of your email, the header information, and it's going to say zero footprint. It's going to say, Timber Sycamore or Timber Tupelo, or the Honduran coup, or whatever. There's going to be code names for those, and it's going to be easy to see the code names because the yoga information and the wedding information isn't worth anything. So Hillary didn't want to keep it. She wants the good stuff to sell it. So it's going to be all the good stuff when they publish the metadata. Now, remember, they're under court order. The FBI is already under court order to produce those emails. So that has already been mandated by a federal judge. Now, Mr. Andrew McCabe, number 2 at the FBI, says he needs 5 years to go through the 650,000 emails. Okay, now
it's amazing that Comey could have taken a look at these emails during the election process and in about a week's time figured out there was nothing in there that was going to be incriminating.
In 8 days, they went through 6,000 emails. But if you look at the videotape, what he says is, well, those were representative of the 650,000. Yeah, of course, they took the 6,000, which were, Hillary's scheduling emails. Hey, the secretary will be there at this and such time. But even then, even in the release of the 800 emails that just came out a few days ago, there was key information about her conference calls that was given to people at the Clinton Foundation, that was given to Doug Band and Justin Cooper at the Clinton Foundation so that people could listen in at the Clinton Foundation. So you have people who you don't know are in the conference room listening into classified conference calls. So that just came out. And even in trying to choose just 800 that don't sound incriminating, they came out with more incriminating stuff.
This is what I said at the top of the hour. It could go so many different directions as far as how the information came to you and what you're following. And I think for people that are following this story, it must be just absolutely mind-blowing for them to be hearing some of this stuff for the first time. And then there are people, I guess, who have their own suspicions. But for anybody that's thinking that it's the Russians who have been hacking, they're going to have their eyes and ears open, certainly, by the information that you have. I want to also make the tie-in with Vancouver, because that's right across the water, and some of our listeners can actually hear us right now in that area. Now, you're on the west or the east coast of the States, and I'm way over here on the west coast of Canada, but there's all these tie-ins around the world. There is one person in particular who is feeling a little persecuted right now, and his name is Frank Giustra. Some people may know his name. He's a businessman in Canada. He's called the wealthiest and most guarded businessman in Canada. He's also the person who lays claim to founding Lionsgate Studios. We've had Stephen Shellen on the show, and we've talked about Frank in a different light. You have a Frank Giustra connection.
Well, we could go for hours on Frank Giustra, as you know. I mean, there's the Frank Giustra Clinton partnership, which is about a group of about 1,100 of the insiders that basically use Lionsgate as a giant money laundering machine. So almost every Lionsgate movie is laundered money in some form, usually drug money, but other forms as well. So there's the first thing. But there's an interesting connection to the BlackBerry story because Research in Motion is in Waterloo. And they hire a lot of their CSIS people out of the Toronto universities. Ryerson's one of them that I visited, and there's a University of Toronto and so forth. So there's an interesting connection there. There's a Soros connection, not to the founder, but to the other guy who gives all the awards to himself, and I can't remember his name right now. But the interesting thing about the BlackBerry connection, and your users will get it because there's a connection through the Brookings Institution that George Soros and the RIM guy are a part of. But they would send all the data to, I believe it was Chennai, India, where the data servers were. And the government came out and said they're going to start looking at the messages. So even if Hillary couldn't get your information on the BlackBerry with a sync, if they couldn't have gotten that laptop underneath your office to be on the same Wi-Fi network or Bluetooth, they could still get you because your information's going to Chennai, and they could have got it in India. And this is something that the Indian intelligence, you can Google it, said, yes, we can do this. Now, I got so many Frank Juster stories. Where to start? Well, there's a gold company called Gold Corp. And then there's another one called Leah Gold, Leagold. And there's a link through that through a guy named Julio Podesta. And I can't remember what Julio Podesta's last name is. But wherever Juster goes, John Podesta is going to go. You know, they've got the other, obviously the famous uranium deal through Uranium One there. Most of the mining deals in Central Asia that I was talking about, Feta Gulen was helping to, Feta Gulen, the guy I talked about, Sessions, was helping to drop the governments. The guy who was picking up the pieces was Frank Justra, along with, and I'll think of the trading company in a second, with Podesta. Just as at the tip of my tongue, but I just can't remember quickly. But it was a Canadian shell company, and Justra worked shell companies through not just Podesta, but a whole myriad of people, depending on, usually running the money through a movie of some kind, through Lionsgate. There's child trafficking allegations through Cyprus. There's just a whole, for the Libyan slave market right now, Justra is involved in with the Greek immigrants, picking and choosing the beautiful kids. I mean, he's there. This company is called GIU, like Justra, GIU, and then MARRA, and that's Julio Podesta's company. But basically, it's a fruit company, and fruit is a great way of smuggling drugs. So basically, the way you work with an intelligence organization to get all the gold, or get all the oil, or get all the girls, or get all the boys, or get all the organs, it's the same process over and over. You bring in a covert force that very subtly kind of gnaws at the underpinnings of key judicial spots, key executive positions, and especially the military and the military police. Because once you have that, nothing else really matters. And that's what DynCorp is really good at. And usually they try to get people into second-in-commands along a rat line. Let's say if I'm going to bring drugs up the Baja Peninsula, I want to obviously have somebody who's in charge of that. And then something will happen, to the guy in charge. And so this is the this is the Podesta story. They brought in the Podestas from Italy, Genoa, Italy. They brought in the Carlos Slim from Lebanon. And they kind of have, I don't know, I guess that means you've got a Latin look to you, and they won't be questioned as being Mexican. And then they start these rat lines. And so if you look at Carlos Slim's brother, who was the head of what they call DFS, like the DHS, Department of Homeland Security in the United States, they basically put him in charge, and all of a sudden people in construction started dying, and people in trucking companies started dying, and fruit companies. I mean, the company that gives Julio Podesta the original loan is the Sinaloa Land Company. I mean, he was funded right from the get. And what you do is you create these wax fruit. Think of your wax bowl of fruit on your that your grandmother has on her table. And you basically cut it in half and fill it with heroin, or fill it with cocaine. And you got to remember, cocaine and heroin and even meth have the same value by weight as gold and diamonds. Okay, so it's worth about 100 times more than marijuana. So it's worth the trouble. And then what the CIA did in Cuba, bringing in Turkish heroin through Italy to have it refined in Italy and brought into Cuba, was they put it in oranges. So this was Lucky Luciano putting it in these wax oranges, and the wax oranges go in the middle of the crate, and the real oranges go on the outside. And there's this smell called limonene, that throws the dogs off. And that's how they brought the original heroin in. And then the fruit company in Mexico was just basically a continuation of that on a global scale. So you're going to see this mango thing that I talk about. You're going to see Hillary, spending 50 diplomats' time for 2 years negotiating with Pakistan so they can bring in these mangoes to fly them directly from Lahore, Pakistan to Chicago O'Hare Airport, which costs you $120 if you do that by FedEx for that weight for a 3-pound package. And somehow you sell it for $18 and expect to make money. Well, if that same package of fruit, those Pakistani mangoes, are heroin, or let's say opium or morphine of refined form, that 3-pound package is worth $24,400, and all of a sudden, this is a pretty darn good little business. That's like selling a nice little sports car, and that's happening right now. In the reporting, I go to the place where they irradiate the mangoes. I go to the place where they irradiate all the or bring in the fruit, from Mexico and South America and so forth. I visited several of the plants. Just so people know, what the process is in Iowa. I went to Iowa. That's one of the Justra things. Is he's been in business with Carlos Slim since, 30 years. Carlos Slim then got into Lionsgate and everything else, and those two are just partners in crime. But all over Central Asia, he got all the gold rights, not just uranium out of Kyrgyzstan, I believe it was, but all of those old republics of the Soviet Union, he was the key guy to clean up the marbles.
One of the things that I did find was an article where it says he's furious that he's been caught up in a vicious smear campaign against the Clinton charities. That's from 2015, mind you, May 6th. But he's furious because, I guess the best defense is an offense. Just couldn't possibly be involved in any such thing. Frank Justra comes up quite a bit in your tale. Really, it's up to people to go back and listen to all the different things that he's been involved with. Was he involved in Haiti, or is there something to do with the child trafficking? I'm just trying to remember the tie-in there.
Well, I don't really. There is a gold mine, VCS gold mining, that they set up in Haiti. Now, when you topple, so each of these things is kind of like an investment fund, like when you go to a venture capital fund. And the way a venture capital fund works is I call all my people, and then 1,000 people in the Frank Justra partnership, 100 people decide to color in the overthrow of Gaddafi. Okay, and it's going to cost 50 million or 100 million or whatever it's going to cost, and you could be out the money. So that's called the Libya play. Let's call it the Libya play. Now, if it pays off, we get all the gold that Gaddafi had, which is at least 11 billion, and he actually had 100 billion stashed all over. He was trying to do central banks a gold-backed currency for Africa, so he had all this gold. Well, I know they got at least 11 billion, and there are emails back and forth between Sid Blumenthal and Hillary about the gold, Libya and Gaddafi's gold. Now, if you got all that, you have to launder that somehow. You can't just say, "Oh, gee whiz," or whatever. So I believe they created the BCS mining in Haiti as a gold funnel to say, "Oh, look, we struck it rich." Now, other people who I'm talking to the head counsel for Aristide, the guy who was elected 3 times and deposed 3 times in Haiti, and her name's Zilli Don. She's a very educated lawyer, U.S. educated lawyer in Haiti, but born Haitian. And she thinks there is gold, but it's all walled off. It's completely walled off. Nobody can see it. It's covered all the way to the sea. So the place where the Caracol and so forth, where the gold is, you can't really see what's going on from satellite. So I think it's a front to process Libyan gold, but she thinks it's actual real gold mining happening there. If you look at the similar things he's done in Congo, Congo is the most uranium-rich country in the world. I mean, they're and I can't remember the ore name, but it's 100 times richer than anywhere else in the world. It's where we went to get the atomic bomb material, and I wish I could remember the mineral name, but I'm not a mineralogist. But the same kind of thing happened there, where basically you take over the country with your 9 Corps police force, military police force. You send the men to the mines, pick and shovel. We're not talking about any automated. They're carrying it on their backs for $1 a day or $2 a day. The women go into prostitution. They put them in prostitution and they sell the kids. Well, they take the cute kids and sell them, and then the other ones they have them be runners over at the mine. It's just like right out of 1890, Heart of Darkness. As a matter of fact, because it's in Congo, I compare it to Heart of Darkness and how things haven't changed. It's a Joseph Conrad novel, and if you follow the Zambezi River along its kind of N shape, it kind of tells the whole story as you get further and further. I think it's to Leopoldville or Stanleyville. I can't remember which. It's the mine is right at the end of it, so it's kind of like perfect metaphor for Joseph Conrad and Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse.
Basically, Apocalypse Now is Heart of Darkness anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah.
These were things that we used to read before the movie came out. Really, there's nothing new under the sun is what I'm hearing here. It just keeps repeating and repeating as far as the tactics that are being used. And some people, I guess, may not be familiar with MENA, and we don't need to go into that here, but you alluded to it earlier. There's things that are in the 90s now that seem like they're ancient history. I mean, there's Waco. There's a tie-in there with Hillary Clinton. There's so many different things that they had their tentacles into, and during the presidency and before and after, they were doing all sorts of interesting things. So I think there's a lot of different videos that they could be watching on YouTube, for instance. Instead of watching TV, you might want to go onto YouTube and watch the MENA Connection or Clinton Cash to get some of the information here. We were talking about, I think it was before we actually went on air, about Debbie Wasserman Schultz. For those in Canada who may not know who she is, can you just give us a brief recap of what's happening on the Hill? You were talking about Sally Yates, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, easy for me to say, and how they tie in to this whole scenario that you're looking into right now.
Sure. Well, Debbie Wasserman Schultz ran the Democratic National Committee, and the Democratic National Committee is basically when you give your money to the Democratic Party, they have the big bank account. So it is a good account to run illegal contributions or things that wouldn't look good. Like if the King of Morocco wanted to give you $12 million and the Phosphate King of Morocco wanted to give you $16 million, you could run it through the Democratic National Committee. Hillary Clinton chose not to do that. She ran it through the Clinton Foundation instead. She wanted all the money. She didn't even want to give away a nickel of it. But the DNC does mete out this money depending on races are closer than others. They do analysis and they give the money out. The thing that happened with Bernie Sanders is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as the head of the DNC, was throwing for Hillary all along the way, and that came out in the DNC leaks emails. And then, of course, at the convention, everyone was, half of the people were very angry about Bernie, me being one of them. And then the day Hillary got the nomination, she fired everybody who had any relationship to Bernie Sanders at all. Well, it turns out that she's been a congresswoman for quite some time, and she is the one who got the Awan brothers their top secret clearance. So through Jackie Spears, who's on the Intelligence Committee, she got Jackie Spears to write the letter, but requested that the 401s get top secret clearance. So that's how Debbie Wasserman Schultz fits in. I don't know. A lot of people think she had an emotional affair, maybe more, with Imran Awan. We don't know.
That you've made some really good connections there in terms of figuring out how all of this works together, because I know there are a lot of people that were Bernie supporters that they kind of knew that there was some stuff going on, but they couldn't quite figure out what it was, and they're still looking at it as Hillary somehow through the convention, but they can't quite figure out what was happening. And there are a lot of people behind the scenes. We have people like Wasserman Schultz, and we have people like Donna Brazil, who is seemed to be in cahoots, and then we had the Clinton News Network. We have all these different people who and groups that are actually behind her, and I guess this helps to sort of sort it out a little bit as to how there might be some more nefarious connections other than just politics at work here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same old intelligence game again. The intelligence network, just think of it as cutting the struts under a bridge or cutting the supports under a bridge or wiring it for demolition, I guess would be a better way to say it. It takes a long time. You do it surreptitiously, and then when there's a go signal, you hit it and the whole thing collapses at once. That's a real clean coup. That's what you want. And then you're there to pick up the pieces for, when you execute the coup. Joule Corporation, Joule Corporation, is the corporation that Podesta was running with, Frank Podesta, that I couldn't remember earlier. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that Joule Corporation. There's also a couple of great connections to Canada. When I mentioned the ISIS people, the ISI, Pakistani ISI, coming into the United States through Canada, I wasn't reporting on third-party information. I personally interviewed a person that almost married a person it's like I married ISI, where she was fiancée. She's Canadian. She's from Vancouver, and she basically was in Karachi, Pakistan. They were taking a tour of the world, all these five-star hotels, eating caviar, all this stuff, living the ISI lifestyle. And then basically decided I shouldn't say anymore to identify her. But anyway, he exploded in anger when she said, I just don't want to marry you. And beat her severely, broke both of her eardrums. He was a karate expert. And somehow she can't come into the United States, but he can. And he actually got citizenship. So something is going on through the state of New York, through a sponsorship in the state of New York. So I'm not reporting about things I don't know about. I'm not anti-Muslim. I'm not anti-Pakistani. I'm anti-Pakistani intelligence in the United States stealing our state secrets and using it against potentially our veterans.
It makes it so that it's very difficult to talk about some of these things without having the waters muddied with the idea that we're picking on a certain group of people. These are just people who are doing certain things, and they're working in cahoots with other people. And it wouldn't really matter where they were coming from. It just so happens that this is the way it's playing out as far as your investigation has gone.
Well, no, you have a really good point, and I believe your Canadian Defense Minister is Sikh, from this kind of troubled area of Kashmir.
Yes.
Well, for those who don't know, there's four major provinces of Pakistan, but then there's also a contested area of Kashmir, and there's a little finger of Kashmir that's Pakistani. And most of Kashmir is Indian controlled. And anyway, the Sikhs are up in this area of Kashmir, and they've always been used as kind of the pawn, to fight on either side, to throw Kashmir in the other direction. And the Awan brothers that I'm talking about have Facebook pages with lots of references to jihad and lots of references to this border area where the drugs come from, where the drug rat lines go. And this has been around since the British East India Company. This isn't anything new. When Pakistan and Bangladesh were part of the British Raj, so this isn't any new revelation that the tea chests coming out of Calcutta were somehow tea. So, I'm not. There's no great revelation there. But what I am saying is these folks are definitely tied to a tribe in that upper northern region of Punjab called the Jat, Jatt. They're a part of the Pakistani 111th, which is the ISI trained 111th group. They've got all kinds of videos with 111 on everything. They're posing with guns. The father on this guy's Facebook page, Imran Awan's Facebook page, he's got a father who runs the National Military Police Force. So, people may think I'm somehow being anti-Pakistani ISI. I'm not. I'm talking very specifically about a very specific rat line in a very specific geographic area.
I mean, you could talk about Al Capone, and there's the Jewish connection when there was prohibition, and groups of people that happen to come from certain areas, like Sicily, for instance, that foment a plan and they carry it out. And it's just the way that it is. It's something that has been happening from time immemorial, I think. As we talked about earlier, these things tend to repeat themselves. And so here we have the Awan brothers and that whole group. You can see the roots. You can see where they're coming from and how they've insinuated themselves. But I find it really interesting when you talk about people being able to immigrate without being vetted. They just coincidentally become citizens when all these other people are standing in line or having to apply from outside of the country and all the various things that people have to do. It's kind of interesting in that way too.
Yeah, and I think Canadians have borne the brunt of their soldiers being in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in these military policing type roles, and the opium production. And these are again, the things I'm saying here are UN based, reports and so forth. There's two areas basically if you think of in India as the old British India, and you cut the ears off of India. Well, let's say you cut the left ear off, that's Bangladesh. You cut the right ear off, that's Pakistan. That's what happened to British. There was called East Pakistan and West Pakistan at that time. That is basically those from 1947 on, the British partition of British India. Those went into the drug business right from the start. And so these rat lines, I use history a lot. I talk about modus operandi. I talk about history a lot. And the rat lines I'm talking about are centuries old. So when people say, oh, it's conspiracy theory, I say, well, okay, here's the original British manual from the Bengal Lancers talking about town to town and what tribes to avoid, attacks when you're getting the quote unquote tea out of there. There's an interesting connection to Canada that I want to mention, which is Harper. Harper basically dismantles all the checks and balances that you have on rat lines, especially Trans-Canada checks. And as you know, Juicer's is very involved in Trans-Canada pipeline and all the Trans-Canada, the railway and all that stuff, and the oil fields out in Calgary, etc. One of the things that did is decommission the Wheat Commission. I don't know if people know that there was an independent board and body overseeing all the wheat traffic that Cargill and other major shipping companies did for Trans-Canada shipment of wheat. I think, Manitoba and Saskatchewan are your wheat belt. Maybe goes further out into Alberta and so forth, or all the way into British Columbia. I don't know. When you take away that reviewing body, you basically just say, instead of doing bags of wheat, I'm going to do bags of heroin, or bags of cocaine. I mean, the oversight was completely removed. I looked into some Canadian trucking companies that are running these TV dinners one week, from all the way from Victoria, or not Victoria, obviously, but Vancouver all the way to Montreal and back. And they're bringing back the stupidest things. Well, if you just wouldn't think, why would you go 3,000 miles, to take that? Well, I looked a lot into, go back to Mena Airport, go back to Hillary Clinton. They used Tyson chickens. They were stuffing heroin and cocaine in Tyson's chickens. And then Tyson's chickens were taking off and going all over the place. And you look at it, if you look at it from the outside, there goes the Tyson chicken truck, you wouldn't know any better. And then I think Walmart picked up Tyson chicken later on. So I've looked into Cargill in rat lines. I don't have enough proof yet, so I can't really come out and say that just yet. But anyway, Canada's it's the same thing going on in Canada with CSIS, with these, you're talking about the guy that CSIS He sticks CSIS on. Yes, the same types of harassment campaigns that are here in the United States from the FBI are the same. We taught CSIS all this stuff in Virginia, at Quantico, Virginia, how to do all this stuff through Blackwater, and a place called the
Hmm.
Academy in North Carolina.
I had a relative that was in the paper industry and talked a lot about how the rat lines worked. Even in that industry, they would put extra weight into the paper and they would charge more. And, they had just things that you would never think about, in the paper industry. But apparently they can put a lot of things into pulp and paper as well for nefarious purposes. So
Meat,
there's,
meat is another one. Meat is another one because they go, well, the dog's barking at the meat truck. Well, of course the dog's going to bark at the meat truck. Meat has been for the longest time, like I was saying with Hillary Clinton. Fruit is another one. Dolls, the toy business, dolls was used in Harlem for decades for putting for the heroin business coming in from the docks in Harlem. So it's just there's no end to it.
one wonders for what other purposes they're doing things as well. But if we wonder why things are not necessarily black and white when it comes to elections, for instance, when we start to get involved in all of this kind of mania that takes place with, factionalizing left, right, whatever. It's interesting because I even wonder about Trump and, you start to look at all of these different people and go, was he put in there for this purpose? And, it's just a big chessboard where there's some people at the top that are actually manipulating things. So one of the reasons I like to have people like you on the show is, you're a special case in the sense that I think that you are going to be opening up something that is that is huge. You are in the process of opening it up on whatever level. The people that are helping you are helping you to do this, not because you're enriching yourself like Hillary Clinton. It's because you want to see justice done. You want to see this kind of stuff being exposed for what it is. Am I right in assuming that that's your motivation?
Yeah, I don't take donations. I don't advertise on my site. I tell people to donate to Judicial Watch, which has been the key legal group that's produced a lot of these documents. And the only way that you're going to go forward, I believe, is through the documents. And what I just do is I put all the documents together. If you remember Gary Webb, who was the journalist that they kind of harassed into suicide in the 90s, and he did a story about the Iran-Contra. This all goes back to Iran-Contra. He basically used public documents, court documents, and he just basically connected the dots. And now I do more than that. I do a lot of door knocking, and I do a lot of personal interviews, and that adds something. Because when you meet somebody who's been beat silly and knows the person and can give you an in-depth interview, that these aren't just 5-year-olds coming in from Syria that look like they. You just got pulled out of a dustbin. They're
Right.
they're nasty. They're now only about 5% or less, maybe even 1%. It's just, and what I talk about all the time with rat lines is you don't need everybody. You only need a very few people. Like let's say organ harvesting. You have 100 doctors at Médecins Sans Frontières. You only need one orderly at 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock at night to choke, the Syrian prisoners and take them over to Turkey, and that's exactly what they're doing in Aleppo. And they're paying them $10,000 a body. Well, you're going to get a lot of bodies, because those folks don't have any money. Those ambulance drivers. So miraculously, a lot of people, died between 2 and 4. So the whole Cargill thing with one of the people I talk about is this Pakistani ISI guy here in Beaumont, Texas, called Javeed, and he's been connected to ISI by several different sources. But they used rice, and this basmati bag or basmati bag is a very sweet-smelling rice bag, and again it throws the dogs off. If I have a Trans-Canada Railroad, I only need 3 or 4 grain elevators in small towns that are struggling economically. I don't need to compromise all 1,000. I just need to make sure that when they get off the Cargill terminal in Montreal, or whatever that city is just beyond Montreal, I forget the name, so that's the other thing I really stress in my rap lines is you need only a very numbers to compromise a very small number of people.
So a lot of these things can be done by compartmentalizing the process. You're doing something that is actually quite hazardous and that a lot of people would not be getting involved in because they know that there are some rather nasty characters out there who might not like to see you doing this kind of work. Tell me about how that is for you personally and what motivates you.
Well, I'll start with about, I don't know if you know Seth Shot, but he was the guy who I believe gave Hillary Clinton's emails from the DNC leaks, from the Debbie Wasserman Schultz leaks, to the press, to WikiLeaks. Anyway, I went to the street northeast Washington where he was shot 3 times in the back, and he was on his hands and knees, and I got on my hands and knees at that corner, and I looked across the street, and I saw a convenience store, and I saw a camera, and I'm not saying I'm going to die like Seth Rich, but I thought there's got to be a camera at that store across the street. So I went across the street and to the Korean gal and or Chinese gal who owned it. And you usually bring in these people that are can't speak much English and they're poor and just got to hold on to that store to work all these hours. And then there's this Hell's Angels group that kind of comes in and intimidates them. They're the suppliers for them, but they kind of intimidate them. Well, and I know this is a long-winded answer to your original question, but what I do is I go and I ask for the photographs. And I later found out that there was a photograph published of the 2 people that shot him in the back. I also went to the hospital where they took him, and I found out he lived an hour and 40 minutes after he was shot. So that's unusual because my son's a doctor and working in trauma in Harlem and lots of gunshots, and you don't die if you live an hour and 40 and you're sitting up talking to your parents. You don't usually die. So was there a black hand in this? Yes. And could Hillary Clinton take me out anytime she wanted? Yeah, she could. She's got people that she could do that. But I look at it like carrying the flag. A lot of these guys in the Civil War, they're the most honorable position in the charge was carrying the flag. You're completely defenseless, but you have the honor of carrying the flag until you get shot, and then somebody else picks up the flag, hopefully before it hits the ground. That was also an honor. So I look at it the same way. I know I'm going to get shot. There's nothing. I know I'm going to end up like Seth Rich, hopefully, so I won't be tortured. I hope I end up like Seth Rich. But somebody else will pick up the flag, and this will go forward. And I know that's a big sacrifice, and everybody says, oh, nobody's going to pick up the flag. Believe me, there are a lot of people there that will pick up the flag. And what I do until then is I act as sort of the point man. We had in Vietnam, we had the point man, and he would always be the guy who got shot until – and the best thing to do is send me information, send me leads. I'll be the point man until, Hillary says enough's enough, and then we go to the next guy. But the problem is my survival strategy is just release a little bit every day at a time, because then they go, well, he didn't do that much today. And then let's not kill him today. And I've been able to live for 100, and my series has gone on 197 days. So far, so good. That's a good strategy. So I think I'm going to make it.
You've got 26 or 27,000 subscribers, and I can't believe it's actually that low. I would think that it's, people should be subscribing to your channel and watching this every day. And this is probably the most monumental thing that's happening, as far as I'm concerned, in the world right now, is that you are out there just putting yourself on the line, and very fatalistic about it, I might add. I know that you do have a faith, and that you do, like your family that went before you, it feels as though you are putting yourself out there almost as in battle, as you said, carrying the flag and more. It does seem like an awful lot, though, to those of us that are watching, and any little thing that I can do to get the word out to other people, I want to do that, and it feels like that's your insurance policy. The more people that know that you're very close to the truth, that you're not being dismissed. I think that probably is the best insurance policy that you have right now. And
That's exactly my strategy. That's exactly my strategy. Yeah, we're one word away. We're one word away from this story breaking. And I said this morning. If Chuck Grassley, who's a senator from Iowa, who's on our Judiciary Committee here in the United States, if he would have said in his questioning of Sally Yates, "Have you heard of the Awan brothers?" Just that would triple the number of people that are subscribing to me and triple the number of researchers that are helping me. And if he would say the other things I've said here on this show, it would bust the whole story wide open. So we're very close. We're extremely close. Coverage in the Daily Caller, Russia Today, RT, some other pickup, but we need that big story.
There must be some things going on behind the scenes at even the highest levels there, where they just stay right away from that.
RT ran our story about a month ago, and this is before I released all this Social Security numbers of the Awan brothers. I released all the Awan brothers' Social Security numbers because I felt national security. I mean, the FBI had 180 days where they did nothing, and now I feel like it's national security, where soldiers, U.S. veterans are at risk. But anyway, we were running, UK RT ran it, and we were number one in the morning story for about 6 hours, and then the shooting happened at Parliament House, and then that took the focus away from this story. But we almost had it. It almost ran away. It almost took off.
The media is in the back pocket of the Clintons and the various other politicians and the people that are involved here. It's as though you are creating a whole bunch of other stories as distractions. Is that
Right.
somewhat true?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, for instance, take the San Bernardino shooting. I mean, it's well known that the CIA basically invested in coming up with LSD and different forms of heroin, but they wanted to promote it, so they got the Hells Angels to be basically run the rat lines. This is a long time ago, okay, in the 50s and 60s. And San Bernardino was the capital. That's the place, the capital in the United States. The CIA picked Trois-Rivières up in the northeast of Quebec for the Canadian rat. So one rat line ran up I-5 to Vancouver, where you are, and the other one ran down, also through New York Harbor, but ran down from Montreal down to New York. But anyway, the shooting with again Pakistani folks, not citizens, and there was many eyewitnesses that said there were three big muscular white guys, all dressed in black fatigues. Many witness accounts. Now somehow that got to be two persons, and one of them was a female, 5-foot female from Pakistan. It just did not wash. Now, if you remember, Mateen, the guy who killed 50 people supposedly by himself in Orlando, he also was saying he was on a team of three. And then later, after Hillary holds a rally in Orlando, his father, who is ISI in Pakistan, his father is sitting behind Hillary in Orlando at the speech in the VIP section. So I mean, the connections from Hillary to ISI are just, there's so many, I can't go through them all. And the Canadian connection here, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of rambling now, but I cover Canada a lot in my series. I cover McGill University, I cover MK Ultra and McGill. I cover, Trois-Rivières, Hells Angels. There was the mosque shooting that I almost went to. I think that was in Quebec City. I'm not sure, but I didn't think my French was good enough to go up there. So I turned around.
You're allowed to go there. It's just that you have to be, make sure you stop at the stop signs and that sort of thing. But you've been to funerals, you've been to meet some of the people who are involved. How many of these are false flags, and did people actually get shot? But you were actually at funerals where people did die as a result of these not false flags, actual events.
I try to see if the tears are real. And what I really, and I go to murder scenes a lot where I think somebody in a rat line's been murdered. I'll go to, I film the blood on the walls and the spatter pattern, not because I'm a ghoulish person, but because I want different people who are experts watching my channel to analyze it. And then they'll come back with these
Right.
annotated photographs that look right out of CSI, Um, it, so it actually moves the investigation forward. There was two girls that were killed recently in a town called Delphi, Ohio. Excuse me, Delphi, Indiana, kind of in between Indianapolis and Chicago. Well, they were garroted, meaning a wire was pulled around their throat, and then what is taught by this very extremist group in Pakistan that has training camps in the United States that I went to. I went to the training camp, the Pakistani training camp in Plainfield, Indiana. Nobody was home. Nobody answered the door. They all lose their courage, when you meet them in the daylight, or you're not 14 and you're not being attacked from behind. But anyway, the name is Fuqra. If you want to Google that, FUQRA. But this is very extreme form of radical Islam. But anyway, they teach a second winding. They teach a second winding of the garret around the throat. And there's video of this stuff and so forth. Well, one of the girls was decapitated in the murder, and the other one lost a finger. The other one lost 4 or maybe 8 fingers. Okay, well, that was 30 miles away from the murder scene. Now, I'm not Sherlock Holmes, but if 30 miles away they're teaching double garroting, and over here we have 2 of the victims that have lost fingers, then I'm like, hey, publish the DNA. There's 2 DNA samples they're not publishing because they don't want to give away the geographic identity and ethnic identity of the killers. If that comes Pakistani, there's a meat packing plant in Delphi. It's called Indiana Packing, and many illegal immigrants are working there from Pakistan and other countries. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm a modus operandi guy, and I'm going to go over there and say, hey, if you don't submit to a DNA test, you're going to go home. And where were you the night of such and such? And I don't care if I have to question 45 people at the plant. I'm going to get to the bottom of that murder. And so what I do is I go to that hometown. I get in front of the sheriff's office. I say that exact what I just said to you. You can watch the film. Most of my films are only 2 or 3 minutes. It's more me being showing people the scene of the murder and the facts quickly of the murder and why I'm there, and then you move on. And that's what I do. I just keep moving on to the next crime scene, and then I ask the audience to help solve the murder and force the sheriff to push out what I call the metadata of the facts of the crime, which they don't do very often.
Nobody seems to be able to figure out the crime or the details, or there's things that are not being published. And it just makes me feel like there's so much more to this story, and there's so many things going on in the background and people being threatened or something else. And your imagination can get kind of carried away. But what I love about the way that you go about doing this is that you follow the information that's been published that everybody can see. Then you, as you say, you get the information together and then you corroborate it. That's what I found amazing, is that you have everything ready for people to look at. By the time we're seeing those videos, there's nothing to question, really. I mean, you've got your ducks in a row. And it's fascinating to watch, but it's also scary to watch in a certain way.
Well, because I also go and meet the mothers of these children, right? So I don't mind talking an extra 10 minutes because somebody out there is going to go, oh, wait a minute. Well, for instance, I did that story in Delphi, Indiana, and about 6 people that watch my channel said, how about the Evansdale girls in Evansdale, Iowa, which is up by Minnesota. And I went to Evansdale, Iowa, which is very close. I stayed in Waterloo, Iowa, and there was a shooting the night I was leaving. Waterloo is kind of a tough town. It was right outside my door at my hotel. But I like to stay in the rat line areas because you get a feel for it's the part that suburban America doesn't see. I like to stay in the urban American parts. I like to be near the shootings because then I know where I'm in the right place. If you don't hear gunshots, you're in the wrong place. I did go to the plant in Evansdale, and they also have a packing plant in Evansdale. This is the Mena Airport Tyson chicken thing all over again. They also have the illegal immigrants again. They also had the two girls were double garroted. So, you know, and then the Delphi police chief was asked about it. Oh, those aren't related. Well, how did you get to that conclusion? I've got an Islamic organization with 22 training camps, and I've got the film from a Colorado police officer showing the double garroting, 6 different instructors. I've got 2 different murders, 2 different girls, 2 different cities, 2 different packing plants, 2 different sheriffs that won't release DNA information. What's going on here? I went to Iowa to Des Moines. Okay, I'm sorry to be on a roll, but I just want to solve these murders for these mothers. I met with Johnny Gosh's mother. If you don't remember, Johnny Gosh was abducted in West Des Moines, Iowa. Now I've talked about this, and I know that everyone says Hell's Angels are going to kill you, but they do ritual killings usually every year when they bring in and induct new gang members. It's just the way it is, so that you don't have anything on anybody else in the gang. Now they abducted this kid I believe it was on July. It was on a Sunday in July, second Sunday in July. Someone came to her. She lost her son. Her son is gone, right? Then her son came back for about 4 years later, but she's never seen her son since. Somebody came to her and said 2 years later, there's going to be an abduction the second Sunday, and it's also going to be a paper boy. She went to all the news agencies. She went to the police department. Everybody laughed at her. That Sunday morning, she got a call from one of the news agencies, and I sat right across from her and looked her in the eyes when she was telling me this. Incredible strength. The woman had incredible strength. She said, "You're not going to believe this, Noreen. They abducted a paper boy about an hour ago in West Des Moines, same place that they took your son." And she said, "Well, I told you so. What did you guys do? How did you know about it?" Because she talked to the editor privately. He said, "Well, the editor came in the newsroom and said that crazy woman whose son's a runaway thinks there's going to be a murder this weekend." So that boy's name was Eugene Martin. And so the Eugene Martin killing and the Johnny Gosh killings are I put those two together in my mind. So, and I'll wrap up here. The last boy, 2 years later, again, she warns the police department, and then a boy named Mark Allen, another paper boy, 2 years later, is abducted. So, I just try to draw the patterns out and let people, make the conclusions for themselves.
People in the local area, again, they just don't seem to be willing to get their hands dirty. And one wonders if it has to do with the fact that there are these training camps in the vicinity, and there have been some threats that have gone on. But I mean, our minds can go crazy thinking about why the local authorities are not looking into it in the same way that you are. And yet basically what I see here is that there's this pattern that wherever you go, there's this, whether it's a training camp, there's some sort of tie-in, and then there'll be these murders in the area. And I think that's true of the car dealership too. We don't know why they particularly wanted to have that car dealership, but it sounds as though there were some reasons behind that, and some people are going to die. Then there's going to be a cover-up. It just seems to me like that's the pattern that we're finding through this series, if nothing else.
People probably, and this will be my last one, I swear, people probably remember this Stevie Stevens, is the Facebook killer. He killed this black man in Cleveland, Ohio. That's one of the funerals I went to, was Mr. Godman's funeral in my old hometown of Euclid, Ohio. And one of the things I did is I just went to where he got his. I went to a barbershop and started asking questions. They said, "Oh no, it's the other barbershop over there where he got his haircut." I started asking questions at his barbershop, and then I went to the place he worked and started asking questions and just keep publishing the information. I stood in front of the place he worked, just because sometimes that cues people visually. Some people are visual, people are auditory. And so anyone listening to the show, George Webb, just send me a message on my video. If you have any leads, a lot of times it's there. I met a 65-year-old grandmother in Des Moines, Iowa, and she's provided the best leads of anybody. She just puts stuff together. It's amazing. So it's a family puzzle. Is what I'm trying to say. It's a family puzzle.
Anecdotally, I think about my mother looking out the kitchen window and being able to tell me everything about the neighbor across the street that she's never met because she's looking at things like taking the trash out. It's these little tiny clues. So the 65-year-old grandmother might be the one that's actually watching because she has the time to be able to observe these small things. So if there are people who would like to contribute to George's investigation and to keep George safe. To me, it's like every day I hope that it's going to get blown open so that your safety is at least somewhat assured. I don't know whether it's ever assured for any of us. I have to say that I admire you. You know, your son has been raised. You've got kids that are raised, and you've just put yourself out there. I have a sense you've been doing this most of your life anyway, in some sort of fashion or another, just wanting to see justice done.
I have a question for you. Joni.
Yes.
You're going to tour the. I saw your Airstream and your really neat photography equipment. Obviously, you're a director of some type. Are you going to do a national tour of some type to do this kind of thing in the future? Meet your guests?
The Airstream's a tribute to my dad, who absolutely loved Airstreams. Every time we went to a campground, we had to go and take a look and see the Airstream. I'm a third-generation photographer, filmmaker. My dad was born in Glendale, California, 1915, and on his birth certificate it says his dad's in the moving picture business, which sounds very fly-by-night. So, there's definitely a legacy there. My brother calls me a documenter, but what I'd love to do is just to go and stop in a town and get people's stories. I have a mobile studio. At any moment, I could be able to put this out on the air with somewhat better quality than just having a camera in my hand. That is my goal. If I can stop at music festivals along the way, I'd love to go to the Chicago Music Festival and Blues Fest.
Well, let me know if I can help you with gas money.
My hat goes off to you. You're doing an amazing job for somebody that's just doing this ad hoc, I guess it would be the best way of putting it, and putting your life on the line for all of us. I just hope it breaks open. Is there any sense that things are really on the cusp of breaking open at this point?
Like I said, we're one word away. That one word could be tomorrow. It could be 100 days from now. But the word is the wand. As
soon as somebody has the courage to put that out there. The word I'm waiting for in the congressional hearings now. So thank you so much, George, for the time. And I do hope that I can check back with you. I know that this is going to be a time that we look back on, as I say, that it's historic in so many different ways. Hopefully it will come to a very positive end and the right people will go where they need to go and hopefully behind bars. Thank you so much, George, and I'll be watching with great interest, and I hope that I've got some other people that their interest has been piqued and they will be watching and sending in their clues and information. We'll talk to you again. Thanks so much, George.
Okay, thanks, Joni. Bye-bye.
Well, that was George Webb. Please, if you are interested in this sort of programming, go on over to my Patreon channel at patreon.com and /CharacterDriven. I am hoping that I'm going to be able to carry on and do even more of this kind of show. And I'm going to put this up on YouTube and various places so that we can get George the publicity that he needs and the support that he needs from the people who know some of the information that he's looking for. So thank you very much for tuning in. It has been a very long show. It's all been incredibly interesting stuff. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much. I'm going to leave you with Pete Seeger, Pittsburgh Town.
Pittsburgh Town is a smoky old town. Pittsburgh. left-hand show. All I do is cough and show in Pittsburgh. Cough and show from the iron filings and the sulfur smoke in Pittsburgh. Lord God, Pittsburgh. Ohio, alligator